The NFL Draft is the greatest offseason spectacle in all of sports, filling out countless mock drafts and hearing the craziest things of players' stock rising insanely or falling unlike anything imaginable before the actual draft takes place. But this year, unlike years in the past, was one of the most historical drafts in NFL history. So let's recap all 32 picks from the draft and decide on who were the winners and losers of day one of the NFL Draft. To kick off the 2024 NFL Draft, the Bears were on the clock, and just to build some anticipation, made us wait a whole 7 minutes before seeing the pick is in. And just as everyone suspected, Caleb Williams went number 1 overall to the Chicago Bears. And as we look back on this trade too between the Panthers and Bears, I think it's fair to say that the Bears won this trade considering the haul that they got and what they ended up turning those draft picks into. And honestly, I think that this is a great pick for the Bears. He's a quarterback that they've been wanting to find, and the kid's just a generational talent is what I think he is. And I mean, and if he can live up to the hype that everybody thinks he's going to be, the Bears might have a franchise quarterback for years to come. I mean, after all, they've been trying to solve this quarterback issue they've had for the past 10 years almost now. And I think especially with the guys around him now, one, Caleb doesn't have to run around like he was at USC. And once he figures that out, I think he's going to develop really nicely too. And honestly, I could see them being a 9-win team. I mean, hell, last year they were a 7-10 team. And that was with Justin Fields as the quarterback. When you consider all the talent that they've added through the draft and the offseason in general, they're going to be a 9-win team and can compete for years to come. Now, the next pick at number 2 was held by the Commanders, and I mean, this is officially where the draft began. Would it be May or Daniels?
24 NFL Draft, Washington Commanders select Jaden Daniels.
Okay, yes!
Quarterback, LSU.
After coming off of a Heisman Trophy award along with his several other awards he earned in college, Daniels is an interesting pick here because he has great film, but honestly for me, I'm kind of skeptical of the kid. I think he honestly might be Justin Fields 2.0. Like, looking at what he did at LSU and all the college experience is great, don't get me wrong, and he's super athletic and can run like Lamar Jackson, but when you talk about him needing to stay in the pocket, I really just don't think the guy's going to be able to do that. And when I was doing all the research and going on to different people's Patreons, specifically Brett Coleman's, he was mentioning that I think it was 49% of his throws were either on hitches or fades. Like, that is not a route tree. That's 2 routes, and when half of them are those 2 routes, I don't really know if he's going to be able to get through his progressions as well as you want to. And I get the comparison with Lamar a little bit. I mean, if you think that running fast means that he comes out to Lamar, that's one thing, but it's different too because Lamar literally has his offense built around him. Like, they built the Ravens to feed Lamar and what he does. Unless Cliff Kingsbury is going to do that for Jaden Daniels, I don't really get the comp right there. So in order for them to get the full capacity that they want to get out of him, they're gonna have to change this offense up and see what they can do. Overall though, who knows what he really could turn into, and I just don't really see it panning out despite all the talent they have around him. At pick 3, it was the New England Patriots, and after weeks of speculation, the Patriots ended up keeping the 3rd overall pick and went with Drake May, the first UNC quarterback to go in the 1st round since Mitchell Trubisky. And we all know how he turned out as a quarterback in the NFL too. I mean, honestly, looking at this pick, if they can get his footwork cleaned up and maybe even sit him a couple games, they may be able to develop him into a superstar quarterback, but they can't give up on him the way that they just gave up on Mac Jones. And I mean, even when you look at the roster that is around Drake May, it's really not that nice. So it's definitely going to take some time to rebuild around May, and they need to be patient if they want to. And one thing that I do agree with that they were saying about him is that I could see him comping out to Trevor Lawrence, but again, it's that issue with his footwork. If it's not going to improve and they're not going to take their time with him, I really just don't see it panning out, and he may not even have half the career that Trevor Lawrence has had. But again, if they take their time, I really do think that this could be a major hit of a pick for the Patriots. Now, the next hotspot in the draft was the Cardinals at number 4 and who they would take. And again, a lot of people were speculating that maybe the Vikings try to trade up to 4, the Giants trade up to 4, but at the end of the day, the Cardinals just ended up holding the pick, which I think was a genius and smart move on their part.
4th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Arizona Cardinals select Marvin Harrison Jr.
The last time that the Cardinals took a wide receiver with this high of a pick was with a player by the name of Larry Fitzgerald, if you're not familiar with him. And look, when you draft a guy you can put on an island and just have the resemblance of a guy like Calvin Johnson, it's a no-brainer. Why would you not take him? And when you pair him with Kyler Murray and a rising tight end in Trey McBride that the Cardinals have been able to land, I honestly think that if they use him in the right way, this kid could go on to become a Hall of Famer and might even manage to put a better career than his dad did. At number 5, we have the Los Angeles Angeles Chargers, who, after completely depleting their roster of any skill players to help Justin Herbert in any way, shape, or form, the Chargers then elected to go with Joe Alt. And I mean, he came in as the best offensive tackle, and on paper, he looks really athletic and ran one of the fastest 40s in the combine. And look, if you're going to play tackle in the NFL, you're going to need to be nasty, especially with all the defensive ends that are running around, like Myles Garrett. I mean, Aaron Donald's not in there anymore, but guys like Chris Jones even. Like, you have to be nasty. And I mean, if he's going to play, especially in the Harbaugh system in building now, then I mean, this draft pick signals exactly the direction that they're going to want to go this year. And like, I mean, if the Chargers are going to become a run-first team as heavy as everybody thinks they are, Justin Herbert's going to be putting up JJ McCarthy stat lines where he's going to be passing the ball like 15, 20 times a game. Like, this dude's no longer going to be just throwing the ball up and down the field. Overall, though, if they can continue to develop Joe Alt and just really just keep him steady, I think he'll be a really good pick. And again, he kind of even reminds me of Joe Thomas maybe, so he could go that route too. Pick number 6 was another no-brainer, kind of that everybody saw coming. Like, I mean, coming out, I think it was fair to say that Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. were basically 1A and 1B. Like, the Giants have been desperate for a superstar wide receiver and haven't had a 1,000-yard wide receiver since OBJ was on the team. And when you look at Neighbors, they get a guy that can literally play any spot on the field as a wide receiver and is the complete package. And when I comp him out, honestly, he reminds me of Jamar Chase, but even more so of Deebo Samuels, I think, just because of once he gets the ball in his hands, it's over. He's gone, or he's just going to truck you. Like, he is just that fast. And like, I might be crazy for saying this, and despite him having Daniel Jones as a quarterback now, I really do think that he might have been the best wide receiver of the 3 that could have gotten taken tonight. And like, hell, if they even do try to feed him the ball like they should, he might end up being the best player in this entire draft. At pick number 7, the Titans went on to take the 332-pound offensive tackle out of Alabama. And sadly, he's most notably known for this play right here. Like, I mean, on paper, this kid is just a mammoth. He literally, once he gets his hands on you, he's not letting go. You're either getting put in the dirt or you're getting driven back 15 yards. He is huge. And considering that the Titans took a tackle last year as well, it seems like they're really trying to book in their offensive line and protect Will Levis, who is most likely going to be the future of that team at quarterback. And I mean, when you're able to pass block or run block like him, I really think that just like the wide receiver position, it was 1A and 1B at the tackle position too between him and Joe Alt. And now up until this point, the draft was pretty much everything. You know, if you did a mock draft, your mock draft was pretty true and it was pretty square up to this point. And just before the pick was announced, Adam Schefter came on air to say this. It was reported that despite just paying Kirk Cousins over $100 million, that the Falcons were now going to go and draft a quarterback?
With the 8th pick, the 2024 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Michael Penix Jr.
Well, there it is.
And like, when I saw this happen live, I mean, I damn near jumped out of my seat. Like, this was insane. This is the most Arthur Smith move of all time. Like, this is just the Falcons being the Falcons at this point. Like, to take this kid 8th overall is absolutely insane. And if this kid is anything but a superstar in the league, this is going to be a major miss of a pick. Like, when we look back on this pick, unless he turns out to be the best quarterback in this draft, he is literally going to be like Ryan Leaf, Jamar Russell-esque. There are so many things wrong with this picture. Like, one, he played in the Pac-12, and even when he was on the big stage against Texas, he didn't even look that good. He was pretty mediocre and never really impressed. And I mean, on top of all of this, he's a lefty. Like, nobody likes catching a football from a lefty. And that's already a good enough reason to not draft him inside the top 10. But when you look at the last 4 drafts from the Falcons, it is pretty interesting to see they do have a pretty young roster now, considering that they have Penix as a quarterback, Bijan Robinson, who they took last year at 8, Drake London, who they took at 8 the year before, and a 23-year-old Kyle Pitts at number 4 the year prior to that. So, I mean, they do have a young roster. Unless he turns out to be like the next Tom Brady or something, I don't really think this was a good pick by the Falcons, even if you do let him sit behind Kirk Cousins and develop for a year or two. And now at number 9, this is where the Bears, again, they just got better and better throughout this entire draft. And honestly, I consider them huge winners of this draft. Getting Rome Odunze is an absolute steal at the number 9 spot. And now, I mean, just looking at the Bears on paper, this team is absolutely stacked. And to be able to get a top 6 player of the draft, yes, I believe that he was a top 6 player in the entire draft at the number 9 spot is just amazing. I mean, the guy can do everything. He's literally Malik Neighbors 2.0, if not a little bit better. And that's saying a lot considering that I said Malik Neighbors might go on to be the best player from this draft. Now for the first trade of the night, the Vikings would trade the number 11th overall pick in a 4th and 5th rounder to the Jets to move up one whole spot, which honestly, I just don't get to move up the one spot unless you were convinced that the Jets were going to take a quarterback. The Vikings managed to land JJ McCarthy, becoming the first Michigan quarterback to be drafted in the first round since Jim Harbaugh himself. And look, I mean, coming into this draft, I don't really think he should have been taken this high, but the system he is going into with the players around him, I think he could really succeed considering that at Michigan, he wasn't asked to do that much. I mean, he did have like practically the Avengers all around him. That's kind of why they went 12-0 and ran the table, and he wasn't asked to do much. But again, now he comes into Minnesota and pretty much has to do the exact same thing, especially after they just signed Aaron Jones too. If they take any sign of what he did at Michigan and apply it to what he's going to do in the NFL, where he doesn't need to throw the ball 40 times a game, JJ McCarthy might end up being the best quarterback of this draft. Like, I mean, as long as they don't ask to put the team on his back, which, I mean, Kirk Cousins never had to do that either. So considering that, like I said, he might be the best quarterback in this draft. Like, I mean, look at the guys he gets to work with now. Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, a young Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and a new head coach as well. I mean, if they can coach him up, the Vikings team could be scary and really start to challenge the Packers and Lions in this division. Now at number 11, we have the Jets, who again did trade back with the Vikings, just one pick. So again, this doesn't really equate to much. And I'm also going to start mispronouncing names because some of these names are a little bit tougher too. So as you guys normally do, feel free to roast me in the comments, even though I know I pronounced them wrong. Thank you. The Jets ended up taking Olu Fashanu. With this pick, they easily could have gone to get Bowers though and stack the offensive weapons, but instead opted to protect Rodgers with a 312-pounder out of Penn State. And like, look, this kid played 700 snaps on the offensive side of the ball and gave up 1 sack. That's absolutely insane to even say into the camera. And I mean, they've already got Tyron Smith, but if they can develop this guy behind the 2 veteran right and left tackles they already have, then he can maybe even one day be the best tackle out of this draft. I mean, even before the draft started, Caleb Williams even said that he wanted the Bears to take him over Odunze, if possible, if he was still available at the number 9 spot. One thing I don't get though is going all in on Rodgers, who's coming off of an Achilles injury. But I mean, hey, if they think they can do it, then I guess take the tackle instead of Bowers. And just when you thought that the draft couldn't get any crazier, even though it is the NFL draft, the Broncos at the 12th overall pick go and do this.
Congrats to Bo for getting drafted.
With Bo Nix being taken at number 12 by the Denver Broncos, for the first time since 1983, 6 quarterbacks were taken in the first round. And this completely blew that year out of the water when Marino was taken, I believe, at pick 26 on top of this. And before tonight, Broncos head coach Sean Payton never drafted a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. And I mean, I guess Sean Payton just didn't want to repeat what happened when he was coaching the Saints and was 1 pick away from drafting Patrick Mahomes before being jumped by the Chiefs and lost out on that. And right after the pick, it was reported that Denver held a private workout with Bo Nix the day after his pro day, in which the Broncos gave him 3 packets of offensive play installation. And then the next morning, as they worked in the classroom with Nix, I mean, they said he crushed it. So I mean, clearly they knew that they were going to take this kid. The one thing I really don't get though is how Bo Nix is being compared to Drew Brees, because when looking at all of his tape, especially coming out of Oregon, who has a very horizontal offense with lots of screens, and also considering the fact that like 70% of his yards came from like his receivers getting yards after the catch, I just don't get Bo Nix being so highly regarded as a Drew Brees comparison. And yet again, I really think he falls into that Michael Penix area where unless he turns into like some Hall of Fame superstar quarterback, drafting him at 12 is just the complete wrong thing and is just a bust of a pick. Now at number 13, I mean, at this point, the Raiders were expecting a quarterback of some sort to be there, but instead that plan kind of got thrown out of the window when all the quarterbacks were taken inside the first 12 picks. So I mean, from there, they kind of just went best available, and Bowers is going to be a generational talent when you pair him with Adams. There could be something there, including Jacoby Myers as well. The only problem that I do see here is that the Raiders have nobody to get these guys the ball. So they're going to have to figure that part out first before they start utilizing that. Oh, and on top of that, they took Michael Mayer last year, which I guess that's just a wasted pick now unless you're going to run 12 personnel the entire game. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that just seems like a little bit of a strange pick taking Bowers to the Raiders. And I mean that you could just tell that everybody from the Raiders staff and organization was just in shock, because even when they showed the draft room, it was just completely dead as none of the quarterbacks remain. Now at pick 14, the Saints would take Talise Fuaga. Again, I know I mispronounced that name and completely butchered it, but I mean, this is a super solid pick. It's nothing crazy, but it's another big body tackle that once he gets his hands on you, like I said earlier, you're going to get put in the dirt or you're going to get pushed back 10 yards. So it's a good pick. And again, I was really nervous because the Saints were getting mocked to take Bo Nix. So once Bo Nix was taken by Sean Payton and the Broncos at 12, I kind of had a sigh of relief too, because then they couldn't mess up by taking him as a quarterback. I mean, the Saints need a tackle to protect Derek Carr, who I still think sucks, but at least we'll give him more time to throw the ball. Who knows, maybe to the opponent or to Chris Olave. I really don't know, because again, he sucks. But up until this point, the craziest thing to happen so far is that the first 14 picks of this draft were all offensive players and had yet to see a defensive player get taken. Like from this point on, any defensive player that is taken is going to have a huge upside and a huge value increase too, considering that you're getting them so late in the first round. And at pick 15 by the Colts, we would see the first defensive player get taken off of the board.
With the 15th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Indianapolis Colts select Laiatu Latu.
Now this is an interesting pick considering that this kid missed 2 seasons after medically being told to retire due to a severe neck injury. But again, just based off of his highlights and some of the games that I did see of him, since I am an ASU fan and got to see him play at UCLA, the guy is just a complete speed rusher and just can get to the quarterback. And again, being the first defensive guy to come off the board at 15 is just great value for the Colts. But it's really concerning that he's gonna have to stay healthy for this pick to pan out. Because I mean, if this kid falls the wrong way once or just takes a hit the wrong way and his career is over, this is just a really wasted pick by the Colts, considering they could have taken many other defensive players that honestly I think might have had a higher value than this kid. But it was really nice to see that even though he could have been a top 10 guy, again, considering the injuries, it was super cool to see how happy he was during when he was getting interviewed and just really couldn't contain any of his excitement. It was really just awesome to see this guy's reaction. And again, at pick 16, we saw another defensive player get crazy value for falling all the way to 16, because yet again, so many offensive guys had been taken that the Seahawks got to land Byron Murphy. I mean, many analysts had this guy as the best defensive player from this draft, and honestly is reminiscent of Aaron Donald if you do watch him a little bit. And I mean, the way he plays is just so fast and quick with his hands that if the Seahawks can develop him really at all, they really can benefit from this pick. Now at pick 17, we saw another trade with the Vikings where honestly I think they might have won the draft because of this, but also I don't know considering the fact that they now only have 3 picks in next year's draft. But we'll get to that in a second. So the Vikings ended up trading with the Jaguars. They ended up swapping first round picks, and the Jags also got a 5th round, 3rd round, and 4th round in next year's draft. But again, this really could be worth it for the Vikings because even Will Anderson himself said that he may be better than him one day. So I mean, to get Dallas Turner at spot number 17 is absolutely insane. Like, Dallas Turner had a 5% chance of being available at the 17th overall pick. But I mean, when the first 14 picks are all offensive picks, that's exactly how that happens. And look, I honestly personally really love this pick, and I love this kid coming out into the draft too, but for him to fall all the way to 17 is just absolutely insane. And like I said earlier, the Vikings honestly kind of remind me of the Texans of last year. They got their quarterback, and then they liked the defensive guy they wanted and jumped a few picks up to go and get the guy that they wanted. And like I said, if he gets coached up right, he could develop into the best defensive player in this draft. Now at pick 18 was held by the Bengals, who took Amarius Mims, who again, he looks like a solid pick. They need to protect Joe Burrow. That's simply put, they have not been able to do that for the 4 years that he's been in the league. So this guy should be able to get the job done. Like, yet again, he has another one of those crazy stat lines while he played at Georgia, where this guy played 774 snaps at Georgia and allowed 0 sacks. Like, he can do it all. He can pull, he can pass block. And again, I think it's safe to say that a lot of the tackles just need coaching. And the same thing can be said with this guy. He's a little stiff when you watch him, but if he stays healthy, then he's gonna be Joe Burrow's new best friend if he keeps blocking the way he did in college. And now with pick number 19 was by the Rams, who had their first round pick since drafting Jared Goff #1 overall 8 years ago. And this year they used it on Jared Verse, another 6'3", 254-pound guy out of Florida State. Like, I mean, this dude is an absolute menace that can bull rush any tackle he plays against. And to be able to add this as a bookend is big, especially after losing Aaron Donald. And when you look at the film, he uses his hands extremely well in order to get by offensive linemen, and really agree with what Booger McFarland said as he comps to a Cameron Jordan. And if he can play like Cameron Jordan, this guy's going to be a solid pick. Now, pick 20, again, it was another offensive lineman in Troy Fontanu who helped the Steelers out. And I mean, with this pick, again, it's just great value. Like, I mean, you can't go wrong with this pick, especially with a guy that has so much versatility on the O-line. He really can help that offensive line and really just play anywhere on that offensive line. Now, pick 21 was held by the Miami Dolphins, who they drafted Chop Robinson, who, one, that is a sick name, and two, the guy was 14 pounds as a baby. Like, what? That's insane. He's another edge guy off the board that, I mean, can line up anywhere on the field. And especially after Jalen Phillips is coming off of a torn Achilles, they're gonna need to add this guy to add pressure to that defensive line. And he's a solid edge guy that can move around all on the offensive line. Now, at pick 22, the Philadelphia Eagles, for the first time since 2002, would use their first round pick on a cornerback. Now, earlier in the day, the Eagles did pay AJ Brown a huge contract, and it was before other big names, so that way they could focus on the pick tonight. I mean, the guy still got paid, but again, it was so that way they could focus on the draft tonight rather than his contract stuff later. And I mean, I think they hit it out of the pick by taking Mitchell, and many people thought that DeJean might be the first corner taken off the board, but instead it was Mitchell. And honestly, I think it was the right pick. This kid is a freak out of Toledo. Like, just looking at the stats he was able to put up, he had 37 pass breakups over the past 2 seasons. And like Field Yates said, he had as good of a pre-draft process as any defensive player in the draft. Like, I get the hype around DeJean, but also I think DeJean, if he doesn't pan out, which I don't know if he will, is just going to be a really good special teams guy, or he's just going to have to convert to safety, to which at that point he's too short to really play safety. Now, at pick 23 was held by Jacksonville, and they ended up taking Brian Robinson Jr., who honestly I have some mixed emotions about. I mean, I get he's a home run wideout for Jacksonville, having lost Ridley in free agency, and he might be a good replacement, fitting in as that role kind of speedster that they do want. But again, just like Jaden Daniels, 50% of this guy's routes were either hitches or fades. And when you look at the film, again, this was brought up by Brett Coleman, this dude doesn't use his hands. He literally just runs into cornerbacks and hopes that he can either one, run by them, or that they just don't pay attention to him somehow, which when you get to the next level, it's just not going to work out. They're literally going to press you into the dirt. And if that continues to happen in the NFL, this dude's career will not last very long. Now, pick 24, we saw another trade between Detroit and Dallas. And I mean, at this point, it looks like Detroit is just basically saying, if you go to play at Alabama, we're going to draft you, considering the fact that they've drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Branch, and now they've drafted Terrion Arnold. It looks like they are just an Alabama U just farm place now. And after making a huge splash in last year's draft, I honestly think that this was an insanely good pick by the Lions to trade up and go get Arnold. Like, I mean, you could just tell by the draft room that Dan Campbell and everyone was ecstatic about being able to draft this guy. And if you didn't know, Nick Saban even said while analyzing and giving his little like take about him, that this guy was the one that started Lank, let a naysayer know. And look, I mean, if Nick Saban has only good things to say about this guy, I think that's a pretty good sign you made the right draft pick. And on top of this, now he gets to go and reunite with Brian Branch and Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. And again, this guy had another really heartwarming story, considering that he gives his janitor all of his jerseys. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that his janitor is going to be receiving his draft day jersey very, very soon. Now, at pick 25, the Green Bay Packers continued the streak of refusing to take a wide receiver in the first round since 2002. Like, that's 22 years they haven't taken a wide receiver in the first round, despite there being solid talent at the 25th overall pick still. It's insane. Like, I get you guys lost Bakhtiari in the free agency period, but you also need to just maybe, I don't know, get more receivers to help your quarterback. That I'm just repeating myself because we've all said this for the past 20 years about Aaron Rodgers and now Jordan Love maybe. But who knows? I mean, it's the draft. Who knows? Maybe this guy's going to be the next Joe Thomas. Moving on to pick 26 by Tampa Bay. And pick 26 was pretty special because they ended up setting a new record with 19 offensive players being selected in the draft with 6 picks remaining. With the 26 overall pick, they would go on to take an offensive lineman. And I mean, this guy was great and they needed to bolster up their offensive line for Baker Mayfield. And that's exactly what they did by getting this great guy who honestly I think is going to develop into a pretty good center once he's on the field and learns all the playbook too. At pick 27, the Cardinals got back into the first round with the picks they already got last year from with their mini trade downs, I should say, with the Texans and I think the Bears too, if I remember correctly. They ended up taking Darius Robinson, who again, this guy is a great edge rusher, and it was pretty interesting to hear during the draft that even though he was labeled an edge rusher, a lot of the analysts think that he might be better as an interior defensive lineman, which looking at his tape, if that's true, I mean, this guy is again going to give that like Aaron Donald speed kind of quickness in the middle of the defensive line that I think a lot of teams are starting to shift towards. And I think one of the craziest trades made all night was with the 28th overall pick between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. Yes. It's almost like the Buffalo Bills are taking a page out of the Packers playbook and just refusing to draft wide receivers for some reason. And like we know what happened the last time these two teams made a trade, because the last time they made a trade in the draft, the Bills gave up the opportunity to draft Patrick Mahomes, which is insane to say now. But yeah, like, I mean, at this rate, Josh Allen may just want to leave Buffalo if this keeps up. The Chiefs went on to take the fastest guy in the entire draft in Xavier Worthy. And I mean, if this guy pans out to do anything, he could be Tyreek Hill 2.0. Like, this guy is just pure speed, and I fully expect Andy Reid to make this guy Tyreek's replacement despite him playing for the Chiefs 2 or 3 years ago. Like, it's absolutely insane that they let Andy Reid get this guy on their team. Like, come on now. And after trading 5 picks back, the Cowboys went on to pick Tyler Guyton, who has been building a relationship with Lane Johnson and working out with him too. So like, I mean, if this guy can follow in anyone's footsteps like Lane Johnson and become half the player of what he was, then this guy is going to be absolutely legit for the Cowboys. At pick 30, the Ravens ended up going on to take Nate Wiggins instead of Cooper DeJean. Again, because honestly, Cooper DeJean is probably going to be just a special teams guy at the end of the day. Coming out of Clemson, this guy looks good. He was a lockdown man-to-man corner, and even one thing they kept saying is that if he can continue to mature and progress as he did at Clemson, then this dude is going to be a stud inside the Ravens defensive system. And at pick 31, I think the Niners might be sending a message to Brandon Ayuk by taking Ricky Pearsall. I mean, they have yet to make a deal with him, and I mean, if this guy can play inside or outside, or overall just really replace Ayuk fairly well, they may rather just keep him on a rookie deal and let Ayuk walk or trade him for some value. Maybe the Bills, or not. And now pick 32 to wrap up the draft was held by the Buffalo Bills, but yet again, they chose to trade the pick away for some reason, because they don't like drafting receivers, I guess, in the first round, like the Packers, I don't know. And I mean, the only reason that they just keep trading back is because apparently they think that they can get their guy at the beginning of day 2, but who knows? Maybe with the first pick tomorrow, they're just going to trade back again and just continue trading back. Who knows though at this point? With this pick, the Panthers opted to take Xavier Legend and is looking to be another weapon on this very, very weak Panthers team, but it's going to be big for Bryce Young for him to maybe build a relationship with this wide receiver, considering the fact that they have absolutely no playmakers around him, and also that Mingo didn't pan out like everyone thought last year. So hopefully this guy can pan out and at least build some sort of relationship with Bryce Young. But that would wrap up a historical draft where we saw 23 offensive players get drafted, 6 quarterbacks go inside the top 10, and even had some very questionable moves in the first round. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know down in the comment section below. What do you think about your team's draft? Did it go well, or are you a Falcons fan and you punched your TV when they drafted Michael Penix? Personally, for me, I really think that the Bears and Vikings were the biggest winners of this draft. And again, I think considering the fact that the Broncos reached and also the Falcons reached even further, drafting Penix and Bo Nix, I think that those are going to be the 2 losers of the draft. But again, let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.